Good evening. I have the odd honor of representing both the New Jersey chapter of the American Planning Association, where I'm a vice president this year, and the Land Use and Planning Committee for the New Jersey Builders Association, where I've been a member since it was founded 20 years ago. In 5 minutes, obviously, I can't talk to the talking points of both organizations, so let me speak for myself this evening, and I'm sure you'll get written comments from both of those organizations in the future. I'll limit myself in 5 minutes to 2 compliments and 3 issues that I would suggest for you to contemplate as you go forward. In the compliments, I heard tonight in 5 minutes and in a couple of pages of the strategic plan more about the economic structure of the state and the demographic challenges we're facing than we got in 20 years of state planning before you. So I compliment you on at least focusing on who it is we're planning for, but I would ask you and suggest to you that we need to go further. Growth isn't fungible, it's not an amoeba. We need to talk specifically about what are the incomes we expect from those jobs, what kind of household formation, what can they afford, what ratio between multifamily and single family do we need to achieve, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But if you're not going to be specific, we've got no way to measure our progress, we've got no way to measure what's happening at the local level and whether it fits or makes sense to the obligation that we owe to our growing population and the kids we all continue to have. The second compliment I'll give you is your analysis of what went wrong with the state plan process I thought was spot on. That we're finally going to end the semi-permanent cross-acceptance process. We're going to admit that plan endorsement was expensive and complicated and ultimately useful and useless and failed. And that we were wrong when we were working on, I was one of the people working on the act in the mid-'80s, to think that if we got all the agencies in a room, they'd air their dirty laundry and straighten out the conflicts in state government. And it turned out that wasn't going to happen without a governor or a lieutenant governor involved specifically in the process. And I think you've recognized that, and I would give you high compliments for, at least on the governmental side, fixing what was wrong with the old process. But the problem that I have primarily is that in reforming the reform, we've completely lost sight of what the reform was supposed to address in the first place. And that was by the late 1970s, our growth areas stopped behaving like growth areas. Whether it was Madison that zoned for no multifamily, Clinton and Bedminster that recruited headquarters and wanted no housing, Mount Laurel that had approved 3 very large PUDs, the new folks moved in and burned the bridge behind them, down zoned so that the growth area would no longer fulfill the growth area function. So that by the mid-1980s, we did 3 things. The Fair Housing Act, the Fair Housing Act, the State Planning Act, and amended the municipal land use law so that you had to do a housing element as a precursor to zoning. And through all 3 of those, the focus was going to be on changing municipal zoning in the growth areas. And hearing you essentially run from that issue tonight was really heartbreaking. Specifically, the role of the map, and here I agree with Mr. Blake, and that may sound surprising, we agree so little, but I think the map is a critical element. For those of you who are concerned that this is a new initiative and state government is coming into your lives, the reality is state government's already done that through a whole series of regulatory programs. The map is the only tool we have to put those all on the same page, look at the outcome, and decide collectively whether we got it right. If we don't have that map, if we're not having the discussions that Mr. Blake was talking about, we'll never know if all of these one-at-a-time regulatory programs out there collectively come together in a way that makes sense. The map is our only way to introduce planning into the regulatory process that we have. We're still going to have maps, a bunch of them. We're still going to fight over where sewer and water goes, but we're not going to have a place where it all comes together for that conversation to talk about planning and goals and the important issues rather than just regulation. And I think the other specific thing is what's happening in the discussion and approach to growth areas. Under the old system, and I know I'm in the weeds, but this is a critical issue, we had Planning Area 1, Planning Area 2, and centers, and I think you've done an appropriate thing by saying state government's going to have a priority area where you're going to spend your money and all of your efforts, and that's primarily Planning Area 1 and some of the centers. And what essentially is being left out is Planning Area 2. And the comments that you're going to get back from the New Jersey chapter and from the builders is, let's get all of the old growth designations under the state plan into your priority category. I'd suggest to you that you'd be far better off served trying to figure out what the alternative growth area really is. And what I would suggest to you is that you've set up a process by saying, we're going to tell you where the priority are, and then we're going to go into this process in which we're going to expect growth areas to volunteer to be growth areas when we've got a 30-year track record that they're absolutely not going to do that for all of the secondary growth areas. I think the state government has a responsibility to tell us both the priority and secondary growth areas as part of the state plan. You're making exactly the same error that they made in the late 80s, early 90s, when they said, well, we run out of time to do centers, we'll do a center designation process. We'll do a plan endorsement process that failed. This process that you've created is essentially plan endorsement 2. And I'd suggest all the lessons you told us as to why that was a bad idea before are going to be a bad idea with the process you just created. I think you have an obligation to say priority area A, or whatever you're going to call it, secondary area B, and you have the onus to tell us where those areas are through your process and not throw it off into the future. I think I've burned up my 5 minutes. I'll stop there for tonight.